everybody, and welcome back to Fuse's channel. We're joined here today by special guest Robert Miller, the Marketing and Communications Director at Fuse. Now, previously, we had talked to the CEO, Mark Smargan. We talked about his background and a bit about the origins of Fuse. But today, Robert, we want to dive into yours and dive into the project a little bit deeper. How are you, and are you ready to get into it?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you, Michael, and thanks for having me on the show.
Perfect. Glad to have you. And before we dive into the project, tell us a bit about your past. You've worked for some interesting places. Tell us about the story that led you up to getting involved with Fuse.
Yeah, so I've been in tech for over 10 years. Started off way back in 2011, even before SaaS was really a big thing, selling software licenses. So working for a large multinational. It was what we call workforce management solutions or human resources solutions. A lot of fun, worked with them for 2 years. It was a Boston-based company, but I was actually selling into the French market. I was living in Paris at the time. And then around sort of 2011, around 2012 going into 13, there was lots of really interesting stuff happening in the startup space. It was around that time that Facebook was listing, Twitter was listing. I spent a lot of my time on Bloomberg, for example, and found that whole industry fascinating, the idea of sort of venture capitalism and all the innovation happening with SaaS in particular. I went to work with a company in Denmark called Trustpilot, which had raised around $10 million at the time. Trustpilot is now a billion-dollar company. They IPO'd on the London Stock Exchange actually in 2021. So it was really easy to see, really sort of interesting to see that early stage venture. We were less than 100 people back then. I think they're, I don't know, between anywhere up to 1,000 people now. So worked with them for a couple of years and then did another stint with a startup in Paris, back in Paris after living in Copenhagen. And then in 2016, having bought Bitcoin back in 2014, a small amount, I bought a small amount of Bitcoin back in 2014, hadn't really done much with it, but was kind of intrigued and had been following the price movements and industry news and whatnot. 2016, found myself in a situation where I was free I had a few months off work. I went to a conference in Berlin, and it was around the time of the hard fork on Ethereum. So a lot of sort of, a lot of politics at the time and unrest in the Ethereum community. And I found it fascinating. I mean, some of the conversations we were having at this conference and the talks that were taking place around the political ramifications, the financial ramifications, the sort of philosophical side of things, and whether it was okay for the team to fork the chain because of a hack that had taken place and whatnot. I realized there was so much more to this industry than I realized, and made it my mission basically to get into the industry. And then in 2017, I was working with a friend of mine, helping him build another startup. And I met the founder of a fintech, a challenger bank in Paris, and we partnered up on a project. So back in 2017, similar to Fuse in some senses, to sort of link the worlds of banking and blockchain, basically. So to find use cases for blockchain within the banking space. And it actually wasn't with Ethereum at the time. It was actually with another platform called Komodo platform. Many early crypto people will remember Komodo back in 2017. They're still around now. They're doing amazing things still. It's a Bitcoin derivative, but they're doing some amazing things around DEXs and whatnot. And then 2018, I did some work with, 2019, I was working with Cointelegraph, big media firm in the space, one of the biggest media companies in crypto, traveled a lot, traveled the world. It was awesome. And then got involved with Fuse during DeFi Summer 2020. And I essentially play, with Mark and with Isaac Rodgin and Carl Anthony and a bunch of other people. Of course, Leon, who's the tech lead. We all help sort of lead the project strategically. My particular focus is on marketing and communications.
Awesome. Okay, so let's dive into that a little bit. Let's digest it a little bit. So you've been playing in international markets, publicly traded companies. You've been playing in blockchain space even for a long time. So what attracts you to it? Well, the one thing I noticed with all those markets is they are kind of exciting and fast paced. Is that it? Is that the spark that gets you?
Yeah, it's the uncertainty, the madness.
Fair enough.
It's yeah, it's the fast pace for sure. It's novelty. I like to explore new things. It's cutting edge. We're very lucky to be in this space. Anyone that's in Web3, that's in crypto, in blockchain, will tell you how lucky they feel to work in this industry. We get to work we get to work with people from all around the world. I've literally worked over the past few years since being in crypto. I've really good friends from literally everywhere. I'm in Israel right now, head office. I travel a lot. Worked with the Chinese, the Russians, the people from all over Europe, the US, South America. I like to live a very sort of global lifestyle, and that allows me to do that both professionally and personally because of the freedom that working in this industry gives me in terms of the ability to travel. What really excites me is what we're doing. What what this technology has the potential to do in solving some of the world's biggest problems. One of which, in particular, is wealth inequality. One of the really interesting things about crypto is that people are naturally becoming more financially literate. People are naturally wanting to learn more about how the financial system works, whilst at the same time learning how crypto works. And I definitely believe that this has got huge potential in terms of reducing wealth inequality, but empowering people to do so, as opposed to it being some top-down approach.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point there, and it's I'd say it's almost a phenomenon with how strong and galvanized the community is based around blockchain and Bitcoin, crypto bros, so on and so forth. I actually was just at the Miami Bitcoin conference, and I noticed kind of the same thing. There wasn't a person there that I couldn't enter a conversation with and not leave knowing something new. Everyone's energized, everyone's bringing something to the table, and that's one of the best things about when you have a community like you guys do, is they bring things to the table too. It's one of the most interesting things versus the traditional, like you said, top-down approach of older companies. So I guess here, before I digress too far, going back to your role, walk us a bit more through what the marketing and communications director does for people.
It's all about educating people on what we're doing, whether it's use cases. So some of the real world use cases on Fuse Network, and really sort of deep diving into what they're about, ensuring that more technically minded people understand what's happening behind the scenes, but also ensuring that more everyday people understand what's happening. So whether it's educating and writing content, or getting content created around the real world use cases on the platform, whether it's around the other aspects to do with infrastructure growth and liquidity growth and whatnot. A lot of what we do is really about educating people. It's actually very similar to we often talk about, in a more philosophical way, blockchains, and layer ones in particular are often talked about as being like nation states in a sense. Fuse is a little bit smaller right now. You might consider it to be more like a gated community. So a lot of the marketing that you'll do is often about showing the growth, basically, and attracting people to come and build with us, right? So it's similar to what you might find in a city, right, which is doing marketing for itself and saying, hey, come and live in this awesome place. So some of the things we try and emphasize will be, of course, our unique selling point, which is around digital wallets and payments. But it's also around ecosystem diversity. For example, payments exist on Fuse. It's one of the core USPs, but you've also got NFT marketplaces, multiple different NFT projects, and therefore artwork on the platform. You've got games on Fuse Network. You've got multiple different applications to do with invoicing and different mobile wallets, etc., etc. So it's really about sort of promoting the growth of the ecosystem, and by doing so, attracting others to join and build with Fuse.
Yeah, I really liked your city state analogy there about these different projects. I had always looked at it like almost like as planets. And you got Bitcoin, which is the big sun, and then other projects you support being little planets along the way. But yeah, I like your analogy a lot. And so you'd be on Planet Fuse, for instance. But all right, so getting it out now, if you can just give me, from your perspective, for someone who, At this point, I would say almost everybody knows about Bitcoin, unless you're living under a rock. They have some understanding of crypto as a whole. Give me just the basic elevator pitch for someone who has no exposure to Fuse yet.
The basic elevator pitch for someone that has no exposure to Fuse, if people are in the industry, we're an Ethereum compatible layer 1 blockchain. We in no way try to compete with Ethereum. We're definitely complementary to Ethereum. Our focus is on interoperability. We don't see any one particular chain being the be all and end all, the sort of master of all. We believe that we believe in a multi-chain future, essentially, we believe in a multi-chain future, and we believe in interoperability. The more we can remove friction between different blockchains, the better. So that's from an infrastructure perspective. And then in terms of the core use cases that we spend our time focusing on for Fuse Network itself, it's really about payments. Mm-hmm. The thing to understand about payments is it's not just, payment technology. If you look at a lot of the most successful companies over the past 10 years or so, things like Airbnb, Deliveroo, Uber, etc. These are all at the core of these apps are payments, essentially. And of course, you're building business models around them. And we believe that with a payments focused approach, and coupling that with sort of Web3 and blockchain and the ability for anybody to build very easily on these finance rails, we're going to be able to bring about use cases and applications that are going to change how the economy works, essentially. So that's our big focus.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. If you build that baseline infrastructure, that foundation, so to speak, the sky's the limit for how people can utilize that and take it in multiple directions. So yeah, as you mentioned, payments is the core of a lot of services. So I guess from there now, walk me through the current roadmap where you guys are sitting currently, what's been done so far this year, for instance, and what you guys got planned for the future.
Yeah, so it's to understand where we're going. It's really important to understand where we've been so far. From a roadmap perspective, and there's a sort of phasical approach to what we do. It's quite standard, I suppose, for a lot of product and engineering focused companies, projects, to spend a quarter, maybe 2 quarters focusing on a specific thing. The network was launched back in 2019, at the end of 2019, and it was launched as a blockchain network, without necessarily focusing on the next big consensus mechanism. It was launched as an Ethereum compatible network with the objective of immediately starting to build business focused tools and mobile wallet infrastructure. So the network was launched. A quarter later, we start focusing on building business tools that make it really easy for developers to build on top of the platform. That led to multiple real world use cases in mid 2020. So things like Good Dollar, for example, which is a UBI project, People Eat, or what is now People Eat, it was the same team, which is a sort of Deliveroo competitor on top of the platform. Really interesting Deliveroo food app with a token model behind it. You've got things like Collectivo Labs, which is a regenerative economy project in Curacao. So yeah, we got to a stage where we had lots of real world projects coming onto the platform. Then consumer DeFi, i.e., we've got all these projects, these businesses essentially that are building onto the platform. How can we provide a financial infrastructure to make it easy for assets and money to move around the ecosystem, and therefore for more, for this sort of this thing to continue, basically to make it more sustainable, so that people got access to liquidity, etc. So consumer DeFi started on Fuse, and that was around the start of last year, focusing in particular on mobile wallet technology, Fuse Cash in particular, which takes lots of the complexities of DeFi that we see on things like Uniswap and PancakeSwap and Aave, etc., and puts it all into a very consumer-friendly app. And then from that came just sort of natural third-party ecosystem growth. So lots of other big names around the space, things like Sushi, for example, The Graph, Beefy Finance, etc., coming into the Fuse ecosystem and building as well in a sort of independent way. So we've had a really sort of product-focused approach, Mark explained last time when you spoke that we were just one big team, essentially, all working on the same things. And now it's really about separation. It's really about separating, taking that technology stack that we've built around the network itself, business infrastructure, mobile wallets, and starting to separate that into 3 different businesses. So the big focus right now is separation. It's separating Fuse Network itself, which is really about how do we create the most stable, secure blockchain out there and business-friendly blockchain out there. The middleware, Fuse Labs, basically, which creates middleware technology, which makes it really easy for developers not only to build on top of the platform, but also get access to the data they need to make the apps they build ultra user-friendly for their users. And then, of course, there's Voltage Finance, which is our DeFi play. It's the sort of flagship DeFi platform on Fuse, was spun out of the Fuse Foundation. It's now a DAO with its own token. And Voltage is really about liquidity and asset diversity on the network. So there's a big focus on splitting those different businesses, a continued focus on payments technology, and sort of learning from Web2 and fintech and seeing how we can take some of those awesome features, but apply them to the world of, to Fuse Network, to blockchain, essentially. And a big focus on bringing more stability to the network itself and more scalability to the network as well.
Wonderful. Well, Robert, I feel like we're just scratching the surface on a lot of this stuff. We can't cover them all in depth in one video, but you did a great job overviewing them at this point. So I'm curious, what are you most excited about as we're wrapping up this interview? What are you most excited about, say, over the next year or so with Fuse?
What gets me most excited is the real world use cases, is the use cases that people can really resonate with. When we pushed, and we've had lots of them, Mystic Valley was a really interesting one. So it's a festival that took place in Thailand, many more to come. We're still working with Bitaze, they're a key partner of ours. It's a festival in Thailand, and over the course of a weekend, $1.3 million in purchases, in transactions, were made through Fuse Network for a festival. So we implemented the payment solution using exclusively Fuse Network plus our mobile wallet technology. It was an awesome use case. And you can see everyday people that aren't necessarily from the crypto space using this mobile wallet, and you know that underneath we were able to implement that at very little cost compared to if you were to implement a credit card based system, in which case it would cost millions of dollars in many cases. Able to implement that in no time at all. Really exciting use case.
Oh yeah.
When we pushed a press release on People Eat back in November, it got an enormous amount of recognition. So People Eat is a sort of Deliveroo competitor, or in fact, well, it's part of the business is a food app. There's a token model behind it. I'll perhaps let the viewers check it out for themselves. So it's about people.com. But imagine if every time you'd ordered a burger on Deliveroo for the past 10 years or the past 5 years, you'd been receiving a token which has got value within the Deliveroo ecosystem. That's the direction that we're going in with an application like that. So what really interests me is seeing more of those. The DeFi stuff is really interesting, seeing liquidity grow, etc., and lending and dexes, etc., is awesome, but it's a means to an end, because what we're really trying to do is to take this and put it into the hands of everyday people.
Yeah, you bring up what you're talking about is almost like the key integration or the holy grail, where it's like it's now involved in virtually everything, but you don't even have to worry about it. It's just there, like you said. Exactly. It's like now it's been adopted by the current infrastructure, and that's where we sit now. So, Robert, I think you did an amazing job walking us through your background, your motivations, how you got involved on the team. You gave us a really good overview of the project as a whole. If anybody else has any other questions for Robert, I'm sure this gentleman will be happy to answer them for you. And Robert, where can people go to find out more and dip their toes in the water?
They can go to the website, fuse.io. They can also reach out to me directly if they want. So on Telegram, if they type Rob Miller, ROBMILLER, they can reach out to me directly on Telegram. And I'd be happy to answer any questions they might have.
Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for watching. Stay tuned for more content coming soon. Robert, thank you so much for joining, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Michael.